Thought I'd talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League. It's probably going to be a bit of a stream of consciousness, so I apologise before I start. And fans of the Snyderverse may not like this review. I don't really understand all the love this film's getting. It's definitely better than the original theatrical release, but not much better, really. And I will be home drawn and quartered for this. I think there are certain elements of the theatrical cut that actually work better. Whilst, obviously, the film is a tonal mess. So I'm not really a fan of the Snyderverse. I think the depiction of Superman is appalling. And I don't necessarily say that's down to Zack Snyder, because I think he was kind of given a script from Nolan. And I also think that he was possibly stopped from doing a Man of Steel 2 because they wanted Batman versus Superman. Now, I do actually like Ben Affleck as Batman, and I do think Snyder's vision probably suits Batman. Anyway, so I'll just a quick breakdown of the story. If nobody knows it, it's pretty much exactly the same as the original theatrical release, but I'll do it kind of chronologically rather than it is in the film because it's easier. So Steppenwolf, who was in the first film, is actually subordinate to a character called Darkseid. Just a quick aside here, I may call him Darkseid occasionally because that's what I've always called him since I was a kid. I never actually knew it was pronounced Darkseid, so I apologise for that ahead. Darkseid came to Earth, there you go, did it already, came to Earth 5,000 years ago to conquer the Earth, found the anti-life formula, which kind of, it's not really explained properly. If you read comics, you've probably got a better idea, but it basically gives you the power to conquer. And he brought with him 3 mother boxes. Now, the mother boxes work completely different from the way they do in the comics. In the film, they're basically sentient computers, almost to the point of being magic. So he comes to Earth to conquer it, because that's pretty much all he does. And he is defeated by a combined army of humans, Amazons, Atlanteans, and Greek gods. He's pushed back, the fleet pull away, leaving the 3 mother boxes behind. Fast forward 5,000 years, because for some reason he never bothers coming back and has completely forgotten where they were, even though they're in spaceships and spaceships have guidance systems. But hey, the film really kicks off when Superman dies and his screams reverberating around the world, and it wakes one of the mother boxes. Again, why this mother box had slept for 5,000 years and waited till Superman died, not really explained. I could probably guess what the intent was, but it's not really explained. And that then mother box then calls to Steppenwolf. Now, Steppenwolf is a character who basically betrays Darkseid at some point in his history, and he's been banished and is trying to atone for his transgression, and is basically trying to conquer thousands of worlds to get in Darkseid's good graces. Now, this is an improvement on the original, because Steppenwolf was just a generic I want to conquer the world villain, and now instead he reports to a generic I want to conquer the world villain. So the box calls to Steppenwolf, he turns up, has a kick-ass fight with Amazons, it's a pretty awesome fight, gets the mother boxes, then spends his time trying to find the others. And again, that pretty much runs how the rest of the previous film runs. And again, the way Batman gets together the other heroes runs pretty much the same way as the other films. The only difference is there's a bit more story to them. And then they resurrect Superman. Superman has a big fight with them. Lois Lane brings him to his senses. They then find out where Steppenwolf is, because Cyborg's father dies to basically enable them to trace the last of the mother boxes. And so they go for the big final showdown. And that's pretty much it. Sorry to say, pretty much like the original film. I'll start talking about the good stuff, because I could go on for a lot longer about the bad stuff. I'd also say that some of the good stuff is also bad stuff at times. So visually the film looks much better. The colour tones are much more fitting, and Zack Snyder is a very good visual storyteller. There's a scene, which you've obviously seen, it's in the original film, where Aquaman is walking down a pier, drinking out of a bottle, water crashing around him. And those couple of moments communicate more about Aquaman's character than most of the dialogue in the film. The battles and the fights are much better, much longer, much more extended. There is actually a fight with the Atlanteans this time, something that was really quite annoying in the first film, that, you know, Steppenwolf turns up and grabs it and disappears. And the ending is so much better. It's got a much more epic feel. You get a sense of kind of more consequences. The Flash scene where he rescues Iris is fantastic visually. It's very much like the Quicksilver scene was in X-Men Days of Future Past. However, there are reasons why that suffers as well. And I think that's probably it. That was a very short list of the pros. I may hit some others when I think about it, as I say, stream of consciousness. Now, as I say, one of my main problems with the Snyderverse is that Superman isn't Superman. He's just this morose misery, really. The idea that he's somehow the symbol of hope just doesn't communicate from anything that's happened in any of these films, or that he's an inspiration. We're just supposed to accept that because we're told it, but it just doesn't feel it. Also, you've got exactly the same problem that Superman always creates in these situations, in that he makes the rest of the team completely redundant because he flies along at the end and he just saves the day without much bother. Although, you know, Flash actually ends up saving the day on top of that. But lots of people are talking about the extra character development. Now, again, this should have gone in the pros, I guess, is that Steppenwolf is much better developed. The fact, as I explained, that he's betrayed Darkseid before, he's trying to atone for his sins. So there's real reason why he's there. He's much more developed as a character, and he just kind of is somebody who wants to get home, which explains a lot of why he's doing and what he's doing. He's not just a generic bad guy. However, for me, that doesn't work with the others. I know lots of people seem to think that, but I mean, the heart of the film is probably Cyborg, which is a change. But I found there was just a lot of information about him rather than character development, because this is a phrase you're going to hear me say, he's a morose loner. He starts off as a morose loner, and right until the very end, he's still a morose loner. I don't see that as character development. You get information, but not development. Also in the Snyder Cut, he basically, his dad, for some reason, gives him a tape dictaphone, which is kind of surprising considering he works at Star Labs. But anyway, he gives him a tape dictaphone and basically tells him that he's a god, a basic techno god, that he can do literally anything he puts his mind to, which I find kind of in contradiction to the scene where they end up fighting Superman, because in that point he says he can't stop his armor working and he can't stop the self-defense mode, and it's just like, well, but you can control everything and anything. You can literally launch nukes at a thought. It just doesn't seem to make sense. This is one of the things I think worked better in the Joss Whedon cut. One of the few things. You got all the history of Cyborg, you figured it out, you worked it out, and he said that he didn't understand the armor. And there's a bit where he talks about flying and said, I couldn't do that yesterday. That to me makes far more sense when it comes to him not being able to control his armor, which instigates that fight. Obviously, he has a bit of an arc. When it actually hits the arc, it's very brief, and that's for him to accept who he is. And it's, to be honest with you, it's a bit of a trite way of doing it. It's kind of like he's promised something else and he says, no, I'm happy as I am. It's not exactly original. But then that kind of happened in the Whedon cut, because he just changed his armor to look more like the comic version of himself. So that, to my mind, was him accepting who he was. I'd also add into that the CGI in his armor, which looks awful, by the way. It's really ropey at times. There's a scene where he's talking to Wonder Woman and it just looks terrible. The matting is awful. And this is kind of a thing through here, because whilst I say it looks amazing visually, it also looks like a computer game visually. That seems to be a typical DC problem. The MCU films, the CGI is streets above this. It's crazy, the difference, and for some reason, I don't know whether it's different effects houses or what, DC always tends to look like computer games. I don't know why, as I say, it's just one of those things. Batman, It's kind of sidelined a bit. He hasn't really got a lot to do. He's kind of putting the team together, but then just spends most of his time fiddling with an aircraft. And his character is morose loner. As I say, you'll hear this a lot. And again, he's relatively marginalised in the fights. He does way more in the last fight, which is great. There was a very strange moment right before the kind of denouement where they're all standing on top of the tower, where he's having to climb up by himself, despite several people who can fly standing on the tower already. I found that a very weird scene. And then you have Aquaman, who is a morose loner. You can see the trend here. And he's okay, but he's just negative the whole time and mopey the whole time. Doesn't really have much of a character. And I think whilst he was a bit too kind of surfer dude in the Whedon cut, at least he had a more defined and different character from other people. Just my feeling. And also, given he's shown in this film as being this kind of morose loner who's very negative all the time, the bit where he shouts, "My man," see, I should be an actor, it's just really out of character for him. Just doesn't seem to kind of really fit. Flash, I would say, is a slightly, basically irritating loner. He's less irritating, I would say, than he is in the Whedon cut. However, oh my God, Ezra Miller cannot run. It's embarrassing and difficult, and I'm not really a fan of Ezra Miller as an actor anyway, so that doesn't really help, but his running is awful. Wonder Woman is a slightly less morose loner, basically. Obviously, this film was made before the abomination that is Wonder Woman 1984, so she can't fly in this one, and Steve died 100 years before. The reawakening of the Wish Steve doesn't happen. One of the things I find weird about Wonder Woman is quite how brutal she is. In fact, all of the fights in this film are incredibly brutal. I think that's fine when you're talking about Amazons fighting Steppenwolf, because that's what you'd expect. But Wonder Woman, wasn't she supposed to have discovered the power of love? And yet somehow that translates into her smashing the skulls of terrorists against walls. I mean, there literally are scenes where she's casting them aside and you just hear a smear of blood go down the wall as they drop. Don't get me wrong, I've got no problem with that sort of thing. I love my horror films, but that just seemed far too extreme for a superhero, especially a DC superhero. It felt really incongruous with what the characters are supposed to be. I mean, there's a scene at the end where Superman is literally pummeling the shit out of Steppenwolf, and it's so aggressive. And again, this is supposed to be Superman. Inspirational, hero, image of hope, just doesn't sit right with me. And there's a bit where she's got seconds to stop this bomb. It's the scene with the terrorist about to blow, for some random reason we never find out, to blow up at 4 city blocks. Although they're British and we don't call them city blocks, so I don't quite get that either. She dispatches all of the terrorists, jumps up, throws the bomb up in the air, and it gets destroyed. Then the terrorist decides he's going to shoot all the hostages. So he gets his machine gun, starts shooting all the hostages, and she flies past, blocking all the bullets. You know, bullets and bracelets. Quite cool scene. And then the terrorist decides he's going to reload and shoot her again. Clearly what she could do is she could run up to him, knock him down, take his gun, do whatever she likes. Instead, she smashes her bracelets together, obliterates him, and explodes the wall out on all the police and other ambulance fire services that are waiting below. And it's like, wow, that was kind of overkill. And you've basically done all that in front of a load of innocent people and school children. And there is a bit where she kind of goes to the kids, "Are you okay?" And one of the little girls sort of says, "I want to be like you." And Wonder Woman says, "You can be anything you want to be." Obviously, only if her mother was fucked by a god can she be actually Wonder Woman, but, you know, let's gloss over that one. So yeah, the action is very violent. They seem to not care about the amount of violence they do. And Batman, that suits, but the others, it doesn't for me. Even Amy Adams, who's infinitely watchable, kind of wanders around looking miserable the whole time. Now I understand she's grieving, so it is contextualized, but it's just she, you know, people complain that she didn't do anything in the previous film, and she does even less in this film. Also, there's some inference there that she's pregnant. And there's this wonderful, touching scene between her and Martha where they're talking about Clark and getting back into life. And then after the scene ends, you find out that it wasn't Martha at all, and actually it was the Martian Manhunter, a character from the comics, who's basically gaslighting her, which I find kind of destroys that whole moment. It's a very weird thing to do. The first thing I should have mentioned about the cons was how long this film is. I mean, geez, it's so long. I think it's 4 hours in many places. I think in the UK, because of the transfer, it's about 3 hours 50 minutes. And I mean, to my mind, it could probably have been a much better 3-hour film. Just so much. There's about 20 minutes at the end you could chop straight off because it's unnecessary. You could cut down on the slow-mos. You'd lose that'd be about 10% of the film saved. So many unnecessary scenes and so many extended scenes. Now, you can give a scene time to breathe, and that's great and that works, but the aforementioned scene of Aquaman walking down the dock, it's just so long and from so different angles, and it's like, you've made your point, I get the point, end the scene. And then you have scenes like women singing and sniffing his clothes that are just very random. There's so much that could have been chopped out of this, was completely unnecessary for the narrative. Now, I don't need a film to skip along, but I was literally looking at my watch during this film because it's just so slow at times. Speaking of which, too much slow motion. Far too much slow motion. Slow-mo in putting a coffee cup down. Aquaman, every time he takes his shirt off, it's in slow motion. Never totally sure why he keeps taking his shirt off, given that he's just swum with his shirt on and then takes it off to go swimming again. It's another of those things, but bare-chested Jason Momoa, I guess. And then, as a result, you have a situation where, as I said, the Flash is presented quite well, like Quicksilver was in Days of Future Past, but the effect of everything going slow while he runs is completely negated by that slow motion being used endlessly through the film. I know that's one of Zack Snyder's things, and it works really well. I mean, I love it in 300. It works brilliantly there, and it has its moments in Batman vs Superman, a film I don't hate. Whilst I don't think it's a great film, the extended cut isn't bad. It's just too much. To that extent, it feels a little bit like a vanity project, like he's literally dumped everything he filmed on the screen, which I guess I can understand. When you're given 70 million to finish a film, then give the fans everything they wanted. I completely get that. The dialogue is incredibly ropey at times. You kind of expect that from a superhero film, but it's, there's the scene where Steppenwolf says to the parademons, "Keep back, she's mine," and she says, "I'm no one's." It's like, no, that's just dumb. And there's a scene at the end, or towards the end, where the Flash is running to turn back time. And it just sounds stupid, some of the stuff he's saying. He says too much, and it just, for me, it just sounded ridiculous. But there are plenty of other excerpts of it. Someone described this to me when I had a conversation about it as being as if it was like a sequence of pop videos, and that is very true. The music is very strange to me in this film. It kind of just appears and disappears randomly, and it's like, here's a scene of this music, here's a scene of this music. Whenever Wonder Woman does anything, you get this Xena-like music playing behind her. There's a couple of utterly ridiculous scenes where they're going to fight Steppenwolf to find him in the tower under Gotham Harbour. And they get off this spider ship that Batman brought, don't know where that came from, and there's rock music playing as they just step down, and then they have a little conversation, and then there's rock music playing as they're walking upstairs. I was like, what? And that's something else that I have a problem with. We don't want to see superheroes walking upstairs. And they're not doing it in any dramatic way. They're literally just trudging upstairs. Why is that scene even in it? I don't get that. You've got these heroes. They're gods. They're amazing. And they're just walking upstairs. Then you have that fight, which is fine. It's all cool and all good. But again, this is something else I preferred in the other film, is the moment where Batman says to the Flash, "Just save one. Just one." It's quite an intelligent, clever part of that film. In this, the Flash just seems to do nothing. Basically, Cyborg decides to get the people to safety, and the Flash just kind of runs up and down stairs with him. And it's just like, you are probably one of the most powerful people here. Why are you just running up and down stairs? It just makes no sense. And I think it's a similar thing to what happens with Superman, and this is something that happens in the comics as well, is that Superman and the Flash too are so powerful, you kind of have to sideline them so anyone else gets a say. I mean, if you've got Superman there and it's a battle, then you don't need Batman really, do you? You know, I think that's part of it, because the Flash really gets sidelined quite a lot, and whilst he does save the day at the end, he just spends most of the fights running around somewhere else instead of engaging in the actual battles. A few little niggles, or biggish niggles. There's a scene where Wonder Woman says that Atlanteans are water breathers. Batman says that he was in the air when he was talking to him, and she says, oh, he must be mixed blood. Doesn't really explain why every other Atlantean seems to be okay with breathing out of water, which is very odd. In fact, they create air bubbles to talk to each other. Yeah, that bit's a massive inconsistency. As I say, I think the biggest thing really is the whole anti-life formula, which is never really properly explained, and the mother boxes being left behind and being dormant for 5,000 years. It's like you flew to Earth in ships, guys. You've got guidance systems. The idea that you'd forget where they were, you'd forget the place that you got your ass kicked, doesn't really make sense to me. I did have an argument about this on Facebook with somebody who basically said that New Gods ships don't have guidance systems. As kind of like, I did point out that, and how did they find their way back? But hey ho. Now I kind of get the mother box essentially, and I think what it is, the idea is that Silas woke the mother box to save Cyborg's life. Now that's probably why it was awake and reacted to Superman's death. But that's never really something they bother to try and point out or infer. It's just something I kind of presume is what was supposed to be explained in the film. There's a scene where Silas, Cyborg's dad, basically superheats the mother box and ends up sacrificing himself so that they can then trace where the mother box has been taken, which has been taken to an irradiated area, I think it's in Russia, which obviously is supposed to be like Chernobyl. However, Steppenwolf's already erected a great big dome of energy around his base of operations. And it seems to me that somebody at some point might have said, what's that bloody great dome of energy over there? You know, it's an irradiated area. There'd be people making sure people didn't go into it. And I thought someone might have seen that. So the idea that he had to sacrifice himself to mark the boxes so they could find the boxes when there's this great big red energy thing lying there never really made much sense to me, but that's fine. I say the main things that really bugged me, as I say, were the pace of the film, the slowness of it, the unnecessary scenes, there's also the 500 different endings rather than just ending it at the point where Superman opens his shirt. There you go, Superman suddenly decides for some random reason to wear a black costume, and nobody comments on it. Nobody at all comments on this fact that, oh, Superman, you've got a black costume on, why is that? There's also, again, this is something that I think worked better in the Joss Whedon film. They're always thinking I'd finished, and I haven't. There's the scene in it where Aquaman says to Bruce Wayne in the film, dressed as a bat, that I'd like to see. Now, in the Whedon cut, there's a payoff to that when he sees Batman in the costume and says, dressed as a bat, I get it. But in the Snyder cut, it's just kind of completely forgotten. And there's no payoff to that line, and I found that a little unsatisfying. So as I say, there are elements of the Whedon cut that I think worked better. It wasn't a better film, don't get me wrong. There are elements that I quite liked, and I certainly think the characterisation was better for what it was anyway. Funny thing is, a lot of things people complained about in the Whedon cut, which they thought he put in, are actually from the Snyder cut. I say, the aforementioned my man, the bubbles that Atlanteans open to breathe in, I mean, just weird dumbness. But yeah, I think I've just about covered what I wanted to say. It might well be I'll carry on in a second. It's an okay film. I watched it twice, found it better the second time I watched it, and it didn't drag as much, but it's still just too long, too much slow-mo, better in many ways, but too many holes for me. And it suffers from Zack Snyder's excesses more than most. I think a lot of people like it because it's not woke, and that's a positive point. It doesn't labour on things that actually can destroy other films. You know, if you're criticising this film, you're criticising it because of its film, not because there's a thing like a little superhero selfie shot thrown in there which slows everything down. Yeah, I think that's about it. I think I'm done. Just a quick plug for my comic, Marked, by Andy Radbourne, available at Indiegogo. Link in the description down below. Thanks for listening, and peace out.